Hello there and welcome back to another episode of Strife's Talking Points. And in today's video we are going to leave the US, the West. We're going to leave all that behind and we're going to go to Africa. There's a story developing in South Africa and Nigeria right now, which isn't being reported on very much by the US news because, let's face it, they prefer to talk about Trump drawing on a map wrong or $100 trillion Green New Deal money, all kinds of stuff. Things which will never happen, which aren't important whatsoever, while South Africa and Nigeria are in the midst of violent riots. From Al Jazeera, South Africa shuts embassy in Nigeria after reprisal attacks. Pretoria closes diplomatic missions as Nigeria encourages its citizens to return home amid anti-foreigner violence. What you have in the two countries in Africa is basically a riot broke out in South Africa. They were looting, robbing, burning, and killing people. And basically the next day, the same thing happened in Nigeria against businesses owned by South Africa. And it's just kind of escalated from there. South Africa temporarily closed its embassy. Why did they do this? While Nigeria... the headline again, businesses in reprisal for attacks on foreign-owned stores in Johannesburg, while Nigeria announced plans to evacuate its nationals from South Africa. South African Foreign Minister Nadel Pandor said on Thursday the embassy was closed temporarily after threats led to fears for safety of staff. There was also, I believe, a planned march or protest out in front of it, and they shut it down. This I just find very strange. There is Afrophobia we are seeing that exists. There is resentment, and we need to address that, Pandor told a Reuters news agency. So Africans being against other Africans is not called nationalist anymore. It's called Afrophobia. Which these are violent riots. Don't think of them as so much as protests from what I've seen. Foreign Ministry spokesman Luna, not even going to try it, condemned the diplomatic missions in the Nigerian cities of Lagos and Abuja have been closed since Wednesday. The announcement, which signals worsening diplomatic relations between the two African countries, comes after Nigeria introduced plans to evacuate its nationals from South Africa following a wave of attacks on foreigners. Now, they're not just attacking Nigerians, they're attacking Kenyans. There was a paper I saw from Zimbabwe or Zambia, and they were also responding to their people, their businesses being attacked in these riots. Evacuation offer, we're going to skip down a little bit. South African government has to assume its responsibilities and protect Nigerians in South Africa, and we have to hold them to account. And they have to do as well as pay full compensation, he added, for the deaths. It also came a day after Nigeria pulled out of the World Economic Forum, WEF, gathering in Cape Town, South Africa, casting a cloud over initiatives to boost intra-African trade. Nigeria also recalled its High Commissioner to South Africa, Kiburu Bala. A presidential source told the news agency of Nigeria that Abuja also demanded full compensation for the loss of life. Now, here we go. Rioting in South Africa has killed at least 7 people in Johannesburg and Pretoria in recent days. They haven't had, to my knowledge, any deaths in Nigeria. The police in Nigeria seem to be a little more on top of it. However, 400 arrests in South Africa. It does seem to be that there it's a much wider issue. They have had some attacks in Nigeria, but not nearly as much. Now, the whole idea is this: Afrophobia. They can't refer to these people as poor rioters. They have to say they're Africans who are afraid of other Africans. Kind of an interdependent self-hate, maybe. I have a lot of trouble when people try and avoid the easier words like nationalism, and they call it Afrophobia. These people are poor, they're desperate, their governments are either just giving them handouts or not doing a lot for them, and the government can't say, it's our poor people rising up against us and lashing out because we don't help them, or we just pander ever so slightly without ever changing things. And if you look at how South Africa's operated since 1994, you'll kind of see that. They actually go through a partial here where they talk about it. There is a targeting of Africans from other parts of Africa. We can't deny that. But there's also criminality, because a lot of this is accompanied by theft. Yes, these are violent looters. They're looting foreign-owned businesses. They're attacking foreign citizens who work in those businesses, describing the attacks as complex phenomenon whose roots were not easy to define. The violence in South Africa has overshadowed the conference of the World Economic Forum in Cape Town. Nigeria announced Wednesday that it would boycott the meeting. The withdrawal from the summit of Nigerian Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, who was scheduled to address the panel on universal energy access on Thursday, has cast a cloud over initiatives to boost intra-African trade. So this seems to be more of a building thing. Apparently there were already issues between Nigeria and South Africa coming into this, and you just see it step up a notch with the outbreaks of violence. And then a story I came across there towards the end, and I'm going to use this version here. This is from The Root as kind of my wrap up here. The Root is, if you are not familiar with it, they are a very biased, more or less a very racist organization. They have Afrophobia. They have just invented other words like colorism as a way not to call black people racist, but to make up a new word so that they don't have to say it, even though it means racist in every way, shape, or form. Not a big fan of The Root, but sometimes it does good to go and see their articles. South African politician calls on mobs to direct their anger at ruling class whites instead of other Africans. Don't know if you know this, but in South Africa, the whites ruled under a form of government called apartheid until 1994, when the ANC, the Rainbow Coalition, as I remember it being called back in the day, was going to bring them out of this apartheid state. It was going to be a full, developed, lasting society of equality, using words like inclusive and equity and all these great things. However, in the 20 years since, none of that has happened. Africa is continually falling further and further behind. South Africa, I'm sorry, being one of the most advanced, most developed nations pre-ANC, they have slowly but surely fallen off that pedestal. Here's a picture here of the EFF leader, Julius, I'm going to say Melma. I'm probably getting that wrong. The leader of South African opposition party is making waves for calling on mobs, not his mobs, forgive me there, to turn their anger over continued economic disenfranchisement on the country's wealthy white minority, as opposed to attacking African nationals. So, and we're just going to go directly to his quotes. Our anger is directed at wrong people, Mala wrote on Twitter, according to Newsweek. Like all of us, our African brothers and sisters are selling their cheap labor for survival. The owners of our wealth is white monopoly capital. They're refusing to share it with us. The ruling party, ANC, protects them. Now, pretty simple there. If you are considered cheap labor, you have limited to no skills. Most people know that skilled labor makes money. However, that's in the West under capitalist systems where we are currently having all kinds of our own issues based on cheap foreign labor. Malmo went on to say that whites shouldn't complain as they had created the mess the country was. Oh, gotta skip down. That's a partial quote. I think these whites must for a second keep quiet because we are dealing with a mess created by them, Malmo tweeted. They're the ones who created this situation by telling us that we are poor and unemployed because foreigners took our jobs. We are fighting for cramps. Not sure if that's supposed to be scraps, but that's an American phrase. One Africa is possible. As South Africa Sunday Times reports, the violence directed at 4 national business owners began on Sunday in Johannesburg, South Africa's largest city, with widespread looting, violence, and protest. The unequal distribution of wealth at the end of apartheid over 2 decades ago has led to increased resentment, especially among the disenfranchised. So, what they're calling for is the same thing that we've seen happen. You can look at multiple countries that came out and they do this redistribution of wealth. It's sort of like the socialist communist idea. And now it's done in these areas as sort of a, let's call it reparations. For years, they've pointed at South Africa and said, look at this booming place. Look at this great stuff. Look at how everything is different. And these places are extremely poor, extremely violent, high crime. There's actually a news story. I saw it on CBS where there was a protest in South Africa over the lost my thought. Over continued rapes and violence that are happening to women during these protests. As we all know, when one thing leads to another, when there's looting and riots and violence, anyone gets caught up in it and bad things happen. There was actually a conference, it's on CBS News, I'll try and link the video from YouTube, but instead of dealing with this issue, they're dealing with that issue. And you know, if you ever want to look at South Africa, you can kind of see they keep trying more and more handouts. South Africa does not have a highly developed economy. They are essentially right now slowly but surely redistributing the wealth from the white landowners to blacks. They're slowly pushing whites out of jobs and putting blacks in there, which is better than the Great Leap. Because if you were to immediately confiscate the property of all the white people, the businesses, and just immediately hand that over to people just because of their skin color, you know, just take it from the whites, give it to the blacks, you would generally see a collapse of the economy. Problem you run into is that people didn't earn it. People didn't get there. They don't have the skills. They don't have the ability. However, that's my take on this guy here from the EFF, who is trying to essentially take everything away from white people and hope that those white people stay to run the businesses, because if they don't, starvation will occur. I do like how they created a new word, Afrophobia. However, have you heard about these? That's always my big thing is, did you know that South Africa and Nigeria are basically riding the streets over each other? Did you know they're fighting? Do you know they've killed at least 7 people? I really do wish I could have seen this CBS story. Yeah, there it is. South Africa rally against gender-based violence. This is the one that made a big story. Was that there were some brutal murders in South Africa, some violent rapes, and they hold a rally for it. Doesn't make the news very well. Because you'll see here, even searching for it directly, you see here, Wrangler jeans, Nigeria amid violence. You see only 3 stories. I don't know. I really do think these huge events like this, where you actually can see 2 countries coming together fighting, no, not fighting. You see riots in both countries while the population's fighting. I think it's a big deal. I think people need to know about it. Please go look this stuff up. Verse yourself, because when our mainstream news goes after it, they don't cover this story. They only cover, hey, they had a rally against gender-based violence, and oh look, the people are bad because of this or that. They don't tell you there's an ongoing riots. There's people being killed on both sides in 2 various countries. There are multiple people from all across South Africa, the continent there, being involved in this. If it escalates, if it grows, this is actually developing a real story, rather than the $100 trillion they're planning on spending for the Green New Deal, which of course that's a made up number. I think some of them said 10 or 12, but I wanted to talk about something real, something important, something that people need to know about. Because escalating violence in Africa is going to be a big deal over time, and they made up a new word for us all. So thank you all for listening. Have a great day. Remember, like, share, comment, subscribe. Leave your opinions below so that I can look at it and kind of judge my own. Thank you and have a great day.